Yeah. Let's move on to the next section of our day. That is the section 3. I would request the chairpersons to unmute the mic and switch on the camera. Starting with Professor Pradyot Narayan Biswas, Dr. Abhishek Anand, and Dr. Naresh Kumar Yadav. I would also like to welcome our moderator for the session, Dr. Gopal S. Pillai. I kindly ask you to unmute the mic and switch on the camera. Over to the chairperson.
Welcome everyone. We have 40 minutes for this session, and we have 4 interesting talks and some good discussion ahead of us. So over to you, Dr. Naresh, and all the chairpersons and moderators.
Thanks, Pritam. Can I start my screen share?
Is Gopal there?
Yes.
Gopal
is there?
Right. If I can introduce Dr. Naresh, Pritam, please introduce Dr. Naresh.
Yes. So, Dr. Naresh Yadav is currently the senior most retinal surgeon at Narayan Netralaya in Bangalore. And, I'm associated with Dr. Naresh way back. We have done our post-graduation together at JJ Hospital in Mumbai. So I know Dr. Naresh has a very keen eye for learning and small details. And I'm sure his talk today is going to be very interesting. Dr. Naresh, please start sharing your screen.
Sir, please put on slideshow, sir.
Yeah. Fine. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So basically, a very good afternoon to one and all. I'll be speaking on blob of vitreous in the anterior chamber. So basically, blob of vitreous is not a very innocuous finding. And the most common cause is after cataract surgery and post-trauma. It can cause various complications like pupillary block glaucoma, IOL and lens subluxation, cystoid macular edema, detachments, vitreous wick syndrome, corneal decompensation, end-off, etc. A good and thorough slit lamp examination is a must. A very cursory examination, sometimes you may miss the presence of vitreous. And once you find the vitreous is there in the AC, you need to look whether it is attached to the wound or whether it is touching to the endothelium. So that also is very important. So the most common cause, as I alluded earlier, is cataract surgery. So it is always better that you are aware of the risk factors before you undertake a cataract surgery, because then only you can prevent complications and manage the case in a better way. The other importance is that you can inform the patient correctly. You can take an informed consent. You could get a special consent about the need for special procedures if needed. The management of PCR starts with good anticipation. If you don't anticipate PCR, you are going to create a mess. PC rent, I think I don't have to really tell. Most of you are good cataract surgeons. So it can happen at any stage of cataract surgery. And there are a few sort of pointers. You should anticipate PC rent early, because to start with, the PC rent is usually small. If it's not managed properly, it can lead to enlargement of the PC rent and nucleus drop. So if you see a peripheral bright red reflex, there's a pupillary snap sign, sudden deepening of the AC, tilt of the nucleus, you're not able to engage the nucleus. All these are pointers that you could be dealing with a PC rent. And once you have a rent, what to do? So first thing is to don't do anything. Take a deep breath and assess. We have a natural tendency that faced with any complication, we just withdraw all the instruments from the eye. So that should not be done, because once you withdraw the phaco probe, the eye is going to collapse. The AC is going to collapse. The vitreous is going to come into the AC. The PC is going to enlarge, and nucleus can go into the vitreous cavity. So the main thing is to not remove the phaco probe. You can remove the side port, and from there you inject the visco. So that will stabilize the chamber, and it will push the PC rent or the whatever the vitreous has collapsed back. And then you can remove the instrument, assess again, and then take a call. If there's a very small chunk of nucleus with a small PC rent, you can continue with the phaco. But if it's a large nuclear material with vitreous prolapse, it's better to enlarge the incision and remove it through either SICS or ECC tunnel. Thorough anterior vitrectomy is a must. That is very important. So vitreous is sort of invisible. So you can use IVTA. It's sort of white sheet over the invisible enemy. You can coat the vitreous. Because one problem is the end point. If you don't stain the vitreous, sometimes you don't realize whether you have done adequate vitrectomy or not. And the other thing is nucleus drop. It's a nightmare because now you have to refer the patient. So one thing is that please don't fish. If the nucleus has gone behind the PC, let it go. Let it fall into the posterior chamber. That is safer for you and the patient. If you try to fish it, you can create giant retinal tears, large breaks. Your aim should be not to further cause more damage. Do a vitrectomy, and if possible, support is there. You can put a IOL, or it can be put later on also. But good vitrectomy is a must, and secure the wound. That is very important. Sometimes you are too tense, you don't sort of secure the wound, and you patch the eye. Next day, there will be corneal edema. So you have to form the AC, secure the wound, and then if required, you can refer to the retina consultant. So the other thing is you need to sort of differentiate between vitreous incarceration and vitreous Vick syndrome. So in vitreous Vick, the vitreous is outside the wound. It is lying on the external surface. And vitreous incarceration, as you can see in this slide, the vitreous is just in the wound. It is not prolapsing outside because the patients with vitreous Vick syndrome are at risk of endophthalmitis. And CDLs will be positive. So you have to differentiate these two conditions. This is a case of vitreous Vick. You can see there is a sort of peaking of the pupil and delayed onset of endophthalmitis is a risk factor. So the management is usually vitrectomy, and very special cases you can do vitreolysis also. So where if it's a single strand, not single strand, you can do NDI vitreolysis. Most of the times, otherwise, you may have to do anterior vitrectomy. Endophthalmitis, incidence of a cataract surgery is 0.05 to 0.3. If there is a PCR, it increases the risk because vitreous is a good culture medium for organisms. So if there's a complicated surgery, always use intracameral moxiflox, and there should be a high index of suspicion in the post-operative period also. And treatment is intravitreal antibiotics or vitrectomy. Post-surgical CME also, if there's a lot of handling, it increases the risk of cystoid macular edema because the inflammatory mediators go into the posterior segment and disrupt the blood-retinal barrier. And all such cases, complete cases, you need to give Nepafenac, anti-inflammatory drops for a longer period of time. And if you find vitreous sticking to the iris IOL, you need anti-vitrectomy. Similarly, retinal breaks also. So what happens with the vitreous prolapse? The hyaluronic acid comes into the anterior segment. There is a lot of viscosity becomes less, more saccades, more traction on the base, and the incidence of detachment also increases if there is a vitreous prolapse. Vitreous in the AC also can cause glaucoma also. It can cause pupillary block glaucoma. It can cause secondary glaucoma. It could be open angle glaucoma also. So here you can see after YAG, there was a vitreous prolapse and laser was done. Vitreous touch syndrome also can cause decompensation of the cornea. I think I just skip all these things because of shortage of time. So basically, as a retinal surgeon, we would always like to do PPV. That is always safer and better. But I think most of the anterior segments can stick to anterior vitrectomy. If done well, most of the cases can do well. So to conclude, risk stratification is important. Vitreous in AC can cause many complications. And you have to remember that PCR does not cause vision loss. Poor management of vitreous loss causes the vision to decrease. So good management is the crux. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks, Dr. Naresh, for dealing so precisely with this important topic. In our enthusiasm to start the session, I forgot to introduce our other two eminent chairpersons. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. P.N. Biswas, sir, very senior vitreoretinal surgeon from Calcutta. He's been the chief of vitreoretinal services at the Regional Institute and the Medical College of Calcutta. And also Dr. Abhishek Anand, assistant professor, Regional Institute of Ophthalmology at the IGIMS Patna. So I welcome them both. I think Dr. Gopal has not yet joined us. He would be joining us soon. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next talk in this session. And that is by Dr. Rajesh Sahai. Is Dr. Rajesh ready?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, sure. Oh, yes. Please.
Like
Yes.
if you have a very thin strand of vitreous, which is causing, which is causing an iris peaking. So what is the preferred these days? You want the panel will go for YAG removal of the hyaloid, or do we go inside and do a 25 gauge vitrectomy or 27 gauge vitrectomy?
See, if there's if there's only a single strand of vitreous strand with peaking of the pupil, sometimes you can wait and watch also if there is no post-surgical CME, the patient is asymptomatic. But most of the time, this vitreous strand with time is going to cause post-surgical CME. So if it's a single strand only, I think it's better to do the anterior approach. You can just snip the vitreous from the anterior segment. That should be good enough.
Will you prefer YAG, sir, or you'll go inside?
YAG can be done. This is single strand, but I'm not sure most of us are not really using ND-YAG vitreolysis. But for a single strand, if it is a lax and it's a sheet of strand, the YAG may not work. So I don't have really any personal experience with ND vitreolysis. The topic also is a little blob of vitreous in AC. See, anterior segment surgeons are scared of vitreous. We like vitreous. So we always want vitreous. So, but definitely
move to our second talk, I think.
Okay. So I'm sorry. I think the second one to follow Dr. Naresh is Dr. Piyush. Am I right? Dr. Piyush, you're ready?
Please unmute yourself, Dr. Piyush.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm ready, sir.
Yeah, good. So Dr. Piyush, over to you. Dr. Piyush is a very prolific vitreoretinal surgeon and director of the Bansal Vision Institute, Pune. Dr. Piyush also is a very dear friend, and we've shared a lot of good times on international trips. Dr. Piyush is going to talk on subluxated cataract with vitreous in anterior chamber. Again, a very important situation which we usually see. Go ahead, Dr. Piyush.
Thank you, sir, for your kind introduction and your love always. Are my slides visible and am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be talking about when you're looking through the slit lamp, what do you look for subluxated? How do you identify subluxated cataract and vitreous in the anterior chamber? I'd like to thank AIOS and Dr. Saurav Sinha for giving me the opportunity. So when the lens is displaced from its normal position in the pupillary area, that's when we call it a subluxated lens. And when this lens is completely displaced from the pupil, it is called as a luxated or a dislocated lens. Now, the term for congenital dislocations is ectopia lentis. Now, the dislocated lens can be in multiple positions. It can be incarcerated in the pupil. It can be seen in the anterior chamber or in the vitreous cavity. In the subretinal space, in rare situations, it might be wandering around, or it might also extrude out through the globe into the subconjunctival space. Now, the etiology over here is manifold. I'm going through these other aspects just briefly. It could be a congenital subluxation. It could be associated with metabolic disorders. It could be traumatic, or it could be spontaneous or consecutive. The metabolic disorders, like we all know, the most commonly seen one is Marfan syndrome. Along with that, there are other conditions which might have associations like Weil-Marchesani syndrome, homocystinuria. I won't be briefing about them though. Now, traumatic is the most common etiology that we see of lid subluxation. The mechanism is essentially a backward thrust to the lens and a rebounding of the lens. There's a pressure wave of the aqueous which forces the iris root backwards, and the vitreous body forcibly recoils, which then comes forward around the lens. Spontaneous or consecutive subluxation can be seen in inflammatory conditions such as hypermature cataracts, zonular destructions, and there are cyclitic adhesions, or traction bands. And mechanical stretching can also lead to it in cases like ophthalmos or patients with high myopia, with staphylomas, or intraocular tumors. Now, how do they present? The patient would typically present with a decrease in distance visual acuity, secondary to astigmatism or lenticular myopia. There might be decreased near visual acuity, secondary to loss of accommodative power. Visual acuity can vary according to the degree of malposition of the lens. There might be monocular diplopia. The patient might come with a red or painful eye. Amblyopia can be seen in cases of congenital ectopic lenses. Now, it's very important to note down the history, the onset, whether there is any associated cardiovascular disease or skeletal disorders, any history of ocular trauma, any family history which details of consanguinity or mental retardation or unexplained deaths at a young age, which can be associated with systemic conditions. Now, even before going to the slit lamp, on retinoscopy and refraction, one can get an idea of subluxation, wherein an edge of a dislocated lens may be identified in the pupillary space. There might be a high myopia with astigmatism, and keratometry can assess the exact degree of corneal astigmatism as well. Now, on ocular examination, there might be possible megalocornea. The anterior chamber will generally be irregular. It could be flat. There might be cells and flare indicating uveitis. Vitreous may be seen in the anterior chamber. The anterior chamber angle is very important to assess that. There might be angle recession, especially in cases of trauma, and synechia might be found over here. The iris might show iridogenesis. There might be transillumination defects. And the pupillary area must be nicely assessed because the aphakic area can give an idea about aphakic correction. It's important to look at the lens position, whether there is any phacogenesis, whether there's associated cataract, what is the status of the zonules, whether they are stretched or broken, because it's going to be important while taking a decision on the management of the patient. One must also look for pseudo-exfoliation. Now, in cases of mild subluxation, the lens edge generally uncovers 0 to 25% of the dilated pupil. When there's more uncovering of 25 to 50%, that is called as moderate subluxation, or severe subluxation when the lens edge uncovers more than 50% of the dilated pupil. Now, in cases of dislocation, when there is an anterior dislocation, generally we'll be able to see a clear lens which has an oil droplet appearance with a golden luster of the rim. It might be cataractis, there might be iridocyclitis, there might be endothelial damage, there might be a raise in intraocular pressure leading to secondary glaucoma. In cases of posterior subluxation, the pupillary area will obviously be aphakic. The lens might be seen in the vitreous cavity. It might also be picked up on an ultrasound B scan in case if the media is not very clear or in case there is associated bleeding. There might be vitreous in the anterior chamber. Corneal endothelial status is very important to note that, and there might be corneal vitreous touch as well. Now, if there is a vitreous blob in the AC, how do you essentially look at that? So you look for the anterior vitreous phase on the slit lamp, and it can also, you make a thin slit beam, and you might also be able to make out pigments in the anterior vitreous and on the other anterior ocular structures, such as the endothelium or even the lens capsule. So that can give an idea that there is vitreous over there. So any other subtle signs? Yes, we can look for pupil peaking. The anterior chamber depth would be irregular, and there would be tilting of the anterior lens slit. One can also make an oblique illumination slit beam and ask the patient to gently move the eye in different directions, which it's going to make it very easy or simpler, much more appreciable to see the movement of the vitreous on ocular movements. Now, obviously, a fully dilated evaluation must be performed. It is also important to note the amount of vitreous and the location. Like I said before, there will be raised intraocular pressure, which may lead to secondary glaucoma. One can see that one can also have pupillary block, which might lead to a very painful eye. There might be phacolytic or anaphylactic reaction. There might be post-traumatic angle recession. Also, one can also, in cases of metabolic conditions, one might be able to differentiate poorly developed angle structures. a dilated retinal examination is very important. One can make out retinal detachment, retinal tears, vitreous hemorrhage might be found, optic nerve edge changes, or macular edema might be found, intraocular tumors might be found. So various complications that can be associated with these conditions are glaucoma or corneal decompensation, uveitis, amblyopia, or retinal detachment. So when do you intervene? When a patient is symptomatic, when the patient does complain of progressive vision loss, when there are signs of high intraocular pressure, and there is endothelial decompensation. So what about the management? I'm going to just briefly talk about this in a few slides. So obviously, the first stage of management would be to control the intraocular pressure if there is secondary glaucoma, if there is a lot of inflammation, controlling the inflammation, and then the definitive intervention would either be spectacle correction or surgical intervention. Now, in cases of subluxated lens with vitreous AC, there are two options. It can be a clear lens or it can be a cataractous lens. If it's a clear lens, and if it's a minimal subluxation, spectacle correction through the phakic portion can provide relief. If it's a marked subluxation, then surgical intervention is what is going to be required. One can either tackle it with the pars plana vitrectomy, lensectomy with IOL implantation, or through the limbal route, wherein a phacoemulsification with iris. Sorry, sir?
No,
shall I proceed?
Yeah, carry on, Piyush. That is just telling you that time is almost over, but you can make your conclusion. Sure, sir. If the in cases of patients with the subluxated lens where the lens is cataractous, and if it's minimal, then in that situation, an anterior segment route wherein an ECC or an SICS or phacoemulsification with anterior vitrectomy with IOL implantation can be planned. In case if it's marked subluxation, then in that situation, either do a pars plana lensectomy with vitrectomy, or you go in and through the limbal route and do a phacoemulsification with the help of iris hooks and put in an IOL. Now, it's also important to note the amount of subluxation because it's going to have a bearing on the management. If it is less than 3 clock hours, obviously one does a slow phacoemulsification with PC-IOL. If it's a 3 to 5 clock hours, you do phacoemulsification with the capsular tension ring or a Cioni ring segment with a PC-IOL. If it's 5 to 7 clock hours, you along with phaco, you put in a Cioni fixation ring or an emerge segment with preferably a PC-IOL. More than 7 clock hours, it's preferable to do a lensectomy with vitrectomy through the pars plana route and SF-IOL or a blue IOL. In any case, depending on what the surgeon assesses, you can always go in for a lensectomy vitrectomy with an IOL. So in conclusion, my take-home message would be it is very important to elicit a good history in such cases. If the history arouses any suspicion, then look for specific findings in the anterior segment, as I've already discussed. Pay attention to the subtle anterior segment changes because this is going to decide whether you must take up the patient for surgery immediately or you should wait. And the timing of the surgery and the management is very crucial over here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Piyush. That was a fantastic algorithm of how to manage a subluxated cataract or a subluxated lens. Any questions from the chair for Dr. Piyush before we proceed?
Dr. Piyush, can I ask you a few queries? And congratulations for a wonderful presentation, first of all. So there are two scenarios which we encounter in our general practice. One is there is a patient who has come with trauma. He was having a good vision, and now he has developed an subluxation, and his best corrected visual acuity with cylinder correction around 3 to 4 diopters. He gets a vision of 612, 6.9. So what will be your take? Will you give him the spectacles and go, or ask him to undergo a surgery in this era where we are very comfortable with SF-IOL or other modes of treatment? And my second question is also one more question. In your last slide, you said that
Then we move on to the second question.
Yeah, only 2 questions. In your last slide, you had said that in 7 clock hours, I would go for a pars plana lensectomy. Any opinion about you regarding going for an anterior approach, or you always approach it through a pars plana? You would like to do an ICC?
I'll take the second.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Would you like to do ICC or something like that, or you always go for an PPL?
Thank you for the questions, Dr. Abhishek. Now, me being a retina surgeon, I am more comfortable in the vitreous cavity as compared to going to the anterior route. So, frankly speaking, yes, if it's a large subluxation, I would probably go in for and do a lensectomy with vitrectomy. If my anterior segment surgeon, obviously I would take the help of my anterior segment surgeon as well. And if they're comfortable in going ahead and doing surgery through the anterior route, I would definitely want that to be done. In case if there are complications, then I would be there as a backup surgeon and probably take care of it. For the simple fact that the results, post-operative refraction, the chances of any further complications, unless, if we can avoid entering the vitreous cavity, would be better. I think that's the second part. The first question that you had was, if I remember correctly, it is if you have a patient who can be corrected with a cylindrical number, would you still take up that patient for surgery? I think we have to consider a couple of factors over here. It is the amount of subluxation, whether there is any vitreous in the anterior chamber, whether the cornea is showing any dislocation, any decompensation, what was the inflammatory status, whether there are any associated retinal complications that are there in such a patient, whether there is any intraocular pressure rate. So all of these factors considered, if all of them seem to be fine, then we don't need to rush and probably go in. Another important thing is the etiology. Sometimes you have these kind of subluxations associated with metabolic conditions, and you don't need to rush in for surgery in such situations. So only when there are secondary complications, that is the time when surgery immediately would be warranted.
I think fair enough. Very good answer.
Thank you, Dr. Piyush. So, after having heard about subluxated cataract, then we move on to the next topic, similar topic, that is subluxated intraocular lens. And we have Dr. Rajesh Sahai. Is he here, sir? Dr. Rajesh? Yeah, you can start sharing your screen. Dr. Rajesh Sahai will be talking to us on subluxated intraocular lens. Dr. Rajesh Sahai is a vitreoretinal surgeon from the Lucknow Eye Center from Lucknow. Go ahead, sir.
Sir, please put on slideshow, sir.
Yeah. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can hear you also.
Okay, fine. So as you said, I'm supposed to tell you about the subluxations of the IOL and looking through the slit lamp. And thank you very much, Dr. Saurabh and the AIOC for giving me this opportunity. And welcome everyone to the virtual AIOC. I don't know how everybody is responding to all this. And as my previous speaker has already introduced, what is a dislocation and subluxation. It's dislocation mainly is whereby the intraocular lens moves out of its normal position in the eye. And it had the reported rate is 0.2% to 3%. And malpositions range from simple IOL destimulation to luxation into the posterior segment. The risk factors are very common here. The previous speaker told about the subluxation of the lens that may have many causes, but here the most common cause is the surgeon himself. So intraoperative causes are the most common that we come across in subluxation or dislocation of IOL. The most commonly PCR, zonular dialysis, it could be broken haptic as you see in this photograph. Prior VR surgery or a glaucoma surgery can also predispose to subluxation of the IOL. Pseudoexfoliation syndrome, where the zonules become weaker and later on can come with subluxations. Uveitis, myopia, trauma, of course, and connective tissue disorders, all are risk factors for subluxation IOL. So these are the few photographs for the subluxated IOLs. You would wonder that the first photograph, the patient had a very good vision. So patient was not ready for any surgery on his eye, despite being a haptic in the AC, IOL in the capture and things like that. So these are the pictures that we most commonly come across. This is a case where there is a CTR also. People have tried their best to keep the IOL in position, but still it has subluxated. This is a wonderful case where both the eyes had subluxation of the IOL later post-surgery. And these are the typical pictures that the VR surgeons, they come across in their routine practice, and their friends usually say that it's thoda sa subluxation or thoda sa dislocation, and we get these pictures. So this is sitting rightly on the fovea, the first photograph. And interestingly, this is a case post-trauma where the IOL is subconjunctival. And there is a drop of ACL here in this photograph, as you see. So these are interesting photographs of dislocation of the IOL. So typical signs and symptoms, of course, when the IOL is in place, you'll see clearly. When it is out of place, vision will be blurry and there could be loss of vision at the same time. And if it is half capturing the pupillary aperture, you'll have diplopia. Like in this case, you can see this, this patient came with the diplopia. You can see the photo in the photograph, there are two discs. You can see one through the IOL and one without the IOL from the aphakic portion. And typically they come with corneal edema. They can be glaucoma. The most intractable part is the management of malignant glaucoma. And that does not resolve by any means. You know, whatever medicine you give, they do not respond. So you have to take these patients for surgery. So these glaucomas are difficult to manage. You can have retinal problems like CME and peripheral retinal tears and retinal detachment. Examination through the slit lamp. Before you do that, you must take a good history of trauma and any other systemic disease, which has already been discussed in previous talk. And preoperative refractive error is an important thing that I would always like to know about. If patient is a hypermetrope or a high myope, it's a big problem, and maybe we have to modify the post, dislocation management that we plan. Wound integrity is another factor that has to be looked into very carefully. Like this is a very nice wound and tightly sutured wound. I would love to have these kind of patients when they are sent to me with subluxation or dislocated IOL. Otherwise, you manage the wound, and that eats up a lot of your time. Condition of the sclera, as you see here, if the sclera is not good, probably it will be difficult to manage, the subluxation of the IOL with some other means. AC depth, angles, iris, IOP, and fundus examination. Why I show this photograph to you, this 3-mirror gonioscope. This is very important. Since I have to talk about I love to have an indirect on my head and see all these patients. I might not require a slit lamp, but one who is not conversant with indirect ophthalmoscope, this is a very useful tool. You use this, you can see the angles, you can see the central retina, and you can see the periphery up to the aura if the pupils are well dilated and the media is clear. The complications of a subluxation or dislocation could be a recurrent IOL dislocation. You place once, it dislocates again. So this is a very common, complication of a IOL dislocation. And of course, multiple surgeries can lead to infection in hypopium. There could be bleeding. There could be corneal damage. Elevation of intraocular pressure, as I said, if this is a case of malignant glaucoma, you see very hazy cornea, and AC absolutely shallow, the iris cornea touch is there. And there could be macular edema and retinal detachment, as I said earlier. AC IOLs are in close proximity to the cornea and anterior chamber angle. And thus, I can't see. So, and they pose increased risk to the damage to the cornea, iris, and angle. There exists an increased risk of pseudophakic bullous keratopathy, glaucoma, UGH syndrome, and whatnot. There are so many complications that can occur with AC IOLs. So given the concerns for such complications, studies recommend avoiding ACL in patients less than 50-year-old. And I generally do not practice AC IOLs. I do not implant ACLs in patients. My preferences are different. But the newer models, as I believe, are better polished. They have flexible loops, and probably they could be tolerated well at the same time. Iris sutured fixation lenses rest in close proximity to the cornea, increasing the vulnerability of corneal decompensation later. And the proximity to the iris and fixation to the iris, leads to chaffing, pigment dispersion, and chronic inflammation. And pupil does not dilate very well also in these patients. So my preference is always the transscleral haptic fixation lenses. But they do have their inherent problems with them, and that is the intraocular hemorrhage, dislocation, retinal detachment, etc. So my take-home message is careful preoperative workup is a must for all cataract surgeries. And don't forget, and need not be disheartened, that accidents do happen. And the moment you feel uncomfortable, stop. Stop is the word. The moment you feel uncomfortable, you stop and seek a senior's advice if available. And if nothing else is there, then you come out of the OR, communicate with the patient and their relatives very clearly, and then refer these patients to a retina specialist. They are the friends in need, actually. And let me tell everyone that dislocated IOLs are better managed when the media is clear. My colleagues, they want their patients to be treated immediately. When the cornea is not very clear, media is very hazy, it's very difficult to assess the posterior segment. So I would generally prefer to wait for these patients, let the media clear, so that we can see the remnant of PC and the good retina examination and plan my future surgery. Thanks.
Many thanks, Dr. Rajesh. It was a wonderful presentation, very nicely explained all scenarios of subluxated IOL. Any question, any quick one question for Dr. Rajesh?
Yeah,
Dr.
please.
Abhishek?
Sir, wonderful presentation, sir. Sir, sometimes we encounter a scenario in which there is a PM a single piece IOL, and we feel that we can, do a SF IOL of one haptic or both haptics. So, what is your experience? You have any experience? Because we have heard from multiple persons that they are doing PMA single haptic scale fixation also. Sir, any experience of yours?
Yeah, I have done one or two cases like that. It does well. It does well. In fact, I remember one of my patients who had a subluxation of the palmar lens, as you said, but both the haptics had gone down. And I just pulled them up and sutured with the sclera, like a scleral fixation lens, the sutured scleral fixation lens. And he's still in follow-up and he's doing well.
Any special precaution you take, sir?
May I intervene, please? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Hi, Saurabh.
Hi, I'm extremely sorry. Preetham, to all the panelists, this is for general ophthalmologists. This is not for VRC surgeon discussion.
Right.
My sincere request for that.
We are getting carried away.
We got carried away. Sorry, sir. Sorry.
Very interesting question, very interesting answers. But please, let's keep the general in mind. Preetham, can you please involve Professor P.N. Biswas? Sir has finally joined us for the session.
Oh, yes. And also, I would like to invite Dr. Gopal. Dr.
Hello.
Gopal. Hi, Dr.
Sorry,
Gopal.
I was elsewhere. Sorry.
No.
Yeah.
We understand.
Hi, Gopal.
Welcome
Hi.
to you.
Hello.
And
Hello. You can remove your mask, I believe. Let me see your full.
Any words from Professor Biswas before we move on to the last presenter, Dr. Rupak? Dr. Rupak, you can start sharing your slide in the meantime.
Welcome, sir. Welcome very much. Professor Biswas, sir, any comments, any queries?
It's nice. Presentation was very, very good and nothing extra has to be added.
Okay, Dr. Rupak, you can proceed then.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Rupak is, just a quick introduction. Rupak Roy is one of the most promising leading people in the country on imaging today. So this is not really he has a photo in everything, but he is one of the leading guys. They have an excellent, he and Kumar have an excellent YouTube channel called Trick. And I think those who are interested in imaging can follow their YouTube channel. It's pretty good. I'm not selling them. They don't work with me. But Rupak is a very good friend of mine. He is a senior consultant at Shankar Netra, Kolkata. And welcome, Rupak. Please start your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, AIOS. So we had a bouquet of wonderful talks. I have few clinical situations and I would like to take experts' opinion on them so that the audience can feel how in a real life situation things can be managed. So so this is a 65-year-old gentleman with a post-complicated cataract surgery. You can see there is vitreous blob in the AC, and it is not touching. The endothelium. So how would you manage this case? Would you observe this case, do a serial specular and pachymetry, or would go ahead with a vitrectomy? I invite opinion from the panelists and the speakers also. Somebody can, or if there is anybody in the audience, they can also answer their opinion on this.
So, in my opinion, I'm Dr. Abhishek. So, in my opinion, I would, in this case, I would go for removing the vitreous through an anterior route. And because this vitreous is a big blob and the iris will keep expanding and contracting, and this will keep releasing of the prostaglandins and the pigment dispersion will always there. So might be we don't have the immediate complication now, but we might end up in a late complication. And as we can see in the picture that it was a cataractous lens. So if it's a cataract lens, we can manage in the same sitting. Both the issues can be addressed in the same sitting.
May I also interrupt once? We have a next session starting at 2:45. So we almost have only next 5 minutes. Could you please wrap it up?
I think we'll finish.
Okay,
so this is another 30-year-old female with a BCVA of around 618. Is Dr. Piyush there? So I would have loved his opinion on this case. How do you approach this case? Observation, phaco with a Sioni, lensectomy and vitrectomy with SFIL. Any of Dr. P.N. Biswas, sir, can you give your opinion on this case?
You can go for Sioni's ring. Hello. And hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
You can put phaco, and after then you put the Sioni's ring and place the IOL inside, if it is possible. Though it is very difficult. Otherwise, you have to go for vitrectomy and place a SF IOL. That is also a good option.
So, as Dr. Piyush said, we can go ahead with try a Sioni's fixation.
Can I?
Yeah. So if it is not working, we can go with the SFIL. So this is another case of a 45-year-old male who had a BCVA of around 6.5 subluxated. So any opinion of this case? Anybody would management options could be observation, bag refixation, or IOL removal with a haptic fixated or scleral fixated IOL. Any opinion from the panelists or the speakers?
Bag fixation is a wonderful option in this case because overall there appears to be a jonglopathy in the superior part. So we can always approach from it, and we have multiple options. Maybe we can just pass a loop of Tenjiro Prolene and we can fix it. We have done it, but then obviously it requires the surgical expertise to do it. But in the last scenario, if it's not possible, then certainly IOL removal with SFIL is another option if the patient consents for the risk of surgery involved. And I think
whenever we go for surgeries like this, I am Dr. Gopal. Whenever we go for any surgery like this, it's always important to look at the specular reflections and be sure that the cornea is good before we touch it, because in cases like that, probably the first surgery may have been traumatic.
That is so true, sir.
Dr. Rupak, you're done. You have any more cases?
Sir, please unmute yourself.
It's done. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, no, sir. Sorry.
You have one more case? Dr. Rupak, do you have anything else?
No, I don't have anything else. I'm done.
Okay. So any last words from the panelists before we conclude? Because we've already done overshot our time.
Must congratulate the moderator for holding a wonderful session. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And over to you, Dr. Saurav, for the next session. I thank all my panelists and speakers in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the speakers for presenting a wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job. Great job. Thank you, Naresh, so much. I could see all your faces finally. Thank God.
Great job. Thank you, chairpersons, moderators, and speakers.